Welcome to Candidates Debates. I'm Anne-Marie Mahoney, your moderator, and today I have with me candidates for trustees of the Belmont Public Library. We have 2 available seats on the public library and 3 wonderful candidates. Mark Carthy, who is in the incumbent, Ed Barker, and Tara Donner, who are also vying for one of those seats. Thank you for joining us. Before we get started, just a few little ground rules so everybody understands how we're going to run our time today. I am going to ask you questions in order, starting with Mark for the first question, and then I will rotate who's first, and I hope I can keep track of that this time. Each of you will have 1 minute to answer the question that I pose, and if any of you want to add something or want to rebut, you'll have 30 seconds to do that, and just kind of raise your hand or catch my eye. Joanna is our timekeeper, and you'll hear a little ding, ding, ding when your time is up. And I'd appreciate it if you just stop talking. Other than that, the goal is to get in as much information and as much discussion as we can today. We're very excited to have you here, and let's get started. My first question for all of you, and Mark, you'll be the first to answer, is what skills, experience, and ideas will you bring to the Board of Library Trustees?
Thank you, Anne-Marie. My skills would be 40 years of running companies and financial analysis, so being able to analyze the finances of the library, the operations of the library. I'm well known as the person who immediately goes to the operational numbers every month and reviews all of those to make sure that we're making the right advances. And then also I've been a library trustee for 15 years. And as vice chair, I was very involved in the earlier efforts to get the library sited, if you remember, by the mobile gas station, and also apply for a grant, which we also got approved for. However, the town didn't follow through with that. We were able to get on the list for the new buildings, and eventually we were able to get it approved. In terms of work that I've done with the library, especially on the parking around the library and getting the hours restricted for parking on the street there, removing the knotweed. In terms of ideas, school integration, more tech like checkout machines, more volunteers to leverage the dollars the town spends on running the library.
All right, perfect. Thank you very much. Ed, what would you like to share with us?
Thank you. First off, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm delighted to have this opportunity to talk about the library. It's a pretty central institution to town. Many of the folks listening and watching here may know that I was very involved in the campaign to approve the debt exclusion that would authorize construction of the library. I was very involved in the canvassing operation, the get out the vote and the canvassing activities there, and found a way to try to stay engaged in that process and joined the Library Foundation and was asked to be the president of that organization and work together with many of our fellow citizens to raise over $5 million to lower the cost to taxpayers of the new building. And in the process have had some very productive conversations about how we as a community support the library and what we choose to do with it. That's really given me the sense that, we have an incredible asset here in the community. What I'd like to see is us leverage that institution and the thousands of people a day there better.
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you. Tara, your thoughts?
Sure, thank you. I think I come at this with a little bit of a fresh perspective, but also paired with a depth of experience in Belmont town government. I've been a town meeting member for 18 years. I've been a school committee member, and I have lived in Belmont for 24 years. I'm also a public school teacher. I'm an English teacher and have been for over 20 years. So I think that the skills that I bring from that include both an educator's viewpoint, but also I have a depth of relationships that I've built with other departments in town and an understanding of the way that the other departments need to work together in terms of budgeting, because we all share the same pie of funding each year, and that's going to be important for the library in the coming years, especially with an expanded building. There's going to be a need for a little bit of an expanded budget.
Okay, thank you. So the 3 of you have very quickly touched on many of the ideas that I had for our discussion today. Thank you. Let me start with something very general. How might the library better serve, what do you see as the role of the library in the life of the community? And Ed, I'm going to start with you.
The libraries are absolutely central to communities. They're a place I like to think of them as the third place. People come together to find information, and importantly, skilled people who can help them interpret and make sense of that information. The result is that it becomes a really critical nexus for discussions about, yes, interests and things that people are curious about, but critical information and education around civic issues, around community well-being issues, and inclusion and belonging that many communities and constituencies feel. So I think it's important here that we make sure that the discussion about what the library is and should be really is broader than just the notion that it's the collection that houses itself within the building. It's really much more than that.
Okay, thank you. Tara, what about your thoughts on library in the community?
Sure. I think the library is a really vital community gathering space where people from all different backgrounds and the full diversity of who we are as Belmont residents can come together to meet on neutral territory. And I think that over the last few years, especially since COVID, we've seen how things can kind of degenerate when people don't have the chance to meet in person. And so I think what the library does is it's not only the space, but also the programming that draws people there, and allowing people to connect with resources and learn about the world and learn about other things in Belmont. In addition, as an English teacher, I'm an avid reader, and it's the way that I have always learned best about the world, through literature, and I think having all the resources there for people to access for free, anybody in Belmont can access, I think is really important.
Okay, thank you. Mark, what about you?
Yes, I think certainly the library is a balance between a hub for the community and a repository of books. And that certainly has been shifting over the years towards a hub from a repository. And secondly, it's integrating the ebook materials into the repository of books, and there's certainly a big shift going on in what Belmont people are using for a library. If we go back, Boston Library was the first free library in the United States. Many libraries in Massachusetts are called free libraries, and that really emphasizes the free access to services that can be done throughout the library, and offering services especially to those who don't have a lot of resources to do it themselves. Then lastly, very important, that kids still like to read physical books. The Pew Research studies show that. And so balancing the electronics that they have every day in their lives and the physical books that we can deliver is very important to parents and families.
Okay, good point. Thank you. Now let's get a little bit specific. What do you think might be the role of the library given its physical proximity to so many schools? So you're across the street from the new grade 7 through 12, but you're in very easy walking distance to two elementary schools, Wellington and the Burbank, and certainly the kids coming down from the Chenery. Does the library have a role there? Is there some kind of connection that can be made with the schools? And Tara, I'm going to let you start first.
Sure, absolutely. As I mentioned, as a former school committee member, it's something that I see a lot of potential for. I also see with my own children who are teenagers, since the library's been closed, what a gap there's been for them in terms of, my middle schooler being able to meet with friends, to work on projects, just to hang out in a place which doesn't require them to pay money. And so I think that is really important, and it is advantageous that it's walking distance. I think the programming is important to draw kids in who aren't even just planning to wander by, but as a destination. I also think that in a tight budget environment throughout the town, there's a lot of opportunities to, the schools don't have professional librarians in all except one of them. We have professional librarians. I think there's a lot of potential there, and I'd like to see that be an area that gets developed with more, more collaboration.
Sure. All right. Thank you. Mark, what about your thoughts?
An extremely important topic of schools. We've done very well with the elementary schools where we hand out the initial library cards to the kids, and those schools have been very welcoming. We haven't done so well in the high schools where they have an empty library room in the new high school, and it's been very disappointing. It's been hard to have our staff, the library staff, work within the school campus. They require school people to be there, school employees. But the library still does very well after school. We have a lot of school projects which use the reference group. And then also our teen section is very strong, and we have teen librarian who helps people there. So we're doing something, but we'd like to do more in the schools.
Okay, thank you. Ed, what are your thoughts?
So I think we're agreed that the library is a critical after-school destination for kids. Just ask the folks in CVS. They'll be delighted to have the library open again coming up here in the end of the year. But I think it's more than just that. I think Mark kind of touched on it. Having skilled adults, trained adults who understand young people in that location is absolutely critical in terms of being able to introduce them to the world of resources that are available to them, but also to be able to have a little bit of an eye on how they're doing. And one of the things that I'd love to see is closer coordination between the schools and the library and the health department. Say, we know that teenagers are in crisis, many of them, and we must do what we can to be able to give them support. Why shouldn't we have those kinds of resources available for kids at the library in a way that they can access? Similarly for other constituencies, seniors and others like that. The library is a place where people go, and it's a great place to bring services to them.
Okay, thank you. Perfect. Let me get a little more specific, and you mentioned CVS, and so one of my questions are, do you have any ideas or thoughts or plans, given that the new building has a lot of big meeting space for the early release days? I think if you talk to a lot of the merchants in Belmont Center, if you talk to a lot of the residents who live around the schools, Wednesday early release days can be really tough. Is there a role for the library there? And Mark, I'm going to start with you.
Absolutely. One of the new things that we're going to have in the new library is the makerspace, which will enable them to make 3D things out of the machines and be very creative. Secondly, in the past, and will continue, we've had cyber programs, programming for teens, being able to, so more programs that draw teens in to be together as a group, meeting each other, doing things together. I think that that's definitely on the agenda, and we want to do more of that. And as you said, with more rooms, we'll be able to do more of it.
All right, excellent. Ed, your thoughts or ideas?
Yeah, I first of all, I'm enormously grateful to the folks at the Friends of the Belmont Public Library who have, over many years, raised basically all the funding for the programming that takes place in the building. And it's important to note that the budget that we pass pays for library operations. It does not actually, for the most part, cover programming. And so we need to make sure that as a board, we're providing the operating team, the librarian and the director and the team with our objectives for what should happen in that space. But I got a ton of ideas, right? I believe that we should have after-school programs that are reinforcing the kinds of things kids are learning. Why couldn't we have, for example, college essay support with local writers, for example, with young people? Why couldn't we have a writer-in-residence program that provides kids with opportunities to do interesting things like that? I think Mark's point is well taken. The makerspace is going to rewrite the book in terms of the kinds of things we can do in that space. You know, why wouldn't we have an artist-in-residence program, for example?
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, Tara, what are your thoughts?
Sure. Well, I think that one thing that's great about the new space is the way that there's such an expanded footprint for the teen space, and the teen space is separated from the children's space, and there's much more gathering space, you know, in general. I think that in the old teen space, there just really wasn't enough to have a separate programming there. But there's been some really successful programs in the past, board games and boba, hot chocolate, different things like that my kids have loved going to. And I think just more of that. But as Mark said, also I think more funding for programming is appropriate, seeing as there's no funding for programming that doesn't come from the Friends. And I think that will really help to maximize, you know, the drawing kids there and helping to get them interested in coming. I think the outdoor space and the way that the library will connect with the outdoor space in front of the Underwood Pool also offers a lot of opportunities to collaborate with, for example, the rec department.
Thank you. All right, very good. Now, let's look at the other end of the spectrum. The library, many of the services have been temporarily relocated into the Beach Street Center. So the library and the seniors have been interacting quite a bit. What do you see when you move into the new building as potential services or opportunities for seniors in the new space? And Ed, I'm starting with you.
So the library many years ago started a program called Kinship for the Kinless, which targeted lonely or single seniors who were not, very well connected in their community. And it was so successful that it's now spun off on its own to the point where the library is only peripherally related to it. I think there is no question that a connection between the COA and the library is an essential piece going forward. I imagine that when the time comes that we close that branch there, that there's going to be considerable sense of loss in that community. I think it would be great to have the Belder bus be able to drop people at the library and take them either back to the COA or take them back home afterwards. That I understand is a policy issue. But it's the little things like that we can do that make it possible for people to come to the library and then have the kinds of programming that connect them to one another and the space.
Thank you. Tara, what are your thoughts about seniors?
Sure. One program that I've seen be very successful in Winchester, where I teach, is a collaboration between the senior center there and different schools and the library to have a book group that's an intergenerational book group that meets a few times a year where, in my case, in Winchester, it's middle schoolers, but where middle schoolers read a book with people from the senior center who are interested, and then there's a couple times a year book group discussions of that. And that is an example of a type of program that I think would be a great collaboration between multiple different departments and can engage seniors, but at the same time also engage some of our younger middle schoolers and elementary schoolers or high schoolers. And I think something like that would be great. I also think continuing the partnership with the senior center to continue to have some of the services, like to be able to pick up books at the senior center, for example, if seniors are going there anyway, I think something like that would also be helpful.
Interesting. Thank you. Mark, what are your thoughts on seniors?
Certainly, one of the things we see is the rise in the IT questions and IT support that seniors really need. And the library people have been very cognizant of that. They see a rise in the use of computers in the library by seniors, and they all need a lot of help. And the second thing is in reference to the COA, I think leaving the book drop where it is, it's cemented into place. Let's leave it there rather than take it out. And I think that could be a convenience for the seniors who use the senior center. Then lastly, something you haven't really brought up, but is other languages. We also serve the Chinese community in Belmont. They have many elderly. We have their books there, and there's some of their newspapers, and I think that's something that we've expanded into to serve that community as well, which is probably 16 to 20% of Belmont now.
It's a very large percentage, yes, and growing, so thank you for mentioning that. Yes, good idea. Let's now, each of you has mentioned money one way or the other. Let's shift a little bit to the idea of budgets. You're going to be opening a bigger building that's going to require more care, maintenance, staffing, et cetera. What do you see as the role of the trustees in the budget process and in advocating for appropriate funding for the library and library services? A couple of you have mentioned that you're relying on the Friends to fund the services and programs that you'd like to run. And Tara, we'll start with you.
Sure. Well, I think that the trustees will have to be very attentive to making multi-year plans and forecasting for what are the needs of the new building that are one-time needs. And I know this is work that has already been started, but there's been a reduction in budget over the last several months / year as the building's been closed. The budget will need to go up as the new building opens for things like the custodial staff to return, and also as we get past the first year of the new building, there's going to be service contracts and maintenance, and stewarding this building carefully so that it lasts a long time is going to be a big job, and that will require some more funds. So I think working collaboratively with the other departments in town to figure out a responsible plan that allows everyone to get what they need, and think about how that's going to change between, our first year as we go
Thank
forward.
you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Mark, what are your thoughts on budgeting?
So essentially, our budget is around 2.6 million. 68% of that is staffing, which is really hard to change. Where we really kind of suffer a little bit is maybe cutbacks in hours when the budget is. So I think the trustees have to really explain the need for Saturday and Sunday opening, because that's something that with different select boards has changed over the years. I think that the next thing is that we've been very successful in the fundraising that Ed mentioned. And I think that maintaining the foundation and the Friends funding to enhance the taxpayers' money is really important. As I mentioned earlier, implementing technology such as automatic checkout and volunteers can also enhance the way we operate. And then lastly, explaining to the citizens the value of the library, what the library really delivers. Because in collecting signatures, people were saying to me, I never use a library, I go on Kindle all the time. But overall, the library is used a lot. The use of books, the use of electronics in the library is certainly rising. And so it's not true libraries are not useful.
All right, thank you. Ed, what are your thoughts?
So it's really clear to me that with the constraints that the town is facing, the budget is going to be a hot button issue for the library. I think it is absolutely essential that the trustees protect the core funding for the library, for its ability to open, for the acquisitions to the collection and to the hours of operation. In fact, that's not just me saying it, it's the state that requires that we have certain minimums that are a function of a 3-year running average on budget and that are a function of how many hours we must be open, how many days a week we must be open. And so it's important for the trustees to help the select board and town meeting understand that those are essentials. They are not nice to haves, they are must haves. It's also important that we tell the story to folks in town that the library is more than just books and does lots more than that. I think also, though, there's going to be necessarily a process of prioritization. So we have to make choices, and that's the role of the trustees. Need to help work with the staff to make those choices.
Okay, thank you.
If I can just add something.
Absolutely, go ahead,
Add 30
yes.
seconds. I think that one of the things, the advantage we're going to have with the new building is that repair costs and maintenance costs will go down a bit. Certainly staffing will go up, but I think we'll be able to manage with what we're being allowed by the town and to go forward. I think it's an important point.
All right, good. Tara?
I think there is an important bump that's going to happen in the first 2 years of the library, though, once certain pieces of the technology and equipment that you talked about run out of their, warranties. I know I've spoken with the library director, and that will require, in the second year that the library is open, another small increase that is one time and won't continue. But I think telling the story of why that's necessary and why it's not going to be an every year continuing thing will be an important job.
Thank you. Ed?
Yeah, I was just going to say it's important to note also that some of those kinds of costs are going to be capital costs, some of those are going to be ongoing operating costs. But one of the things we have to keep in mind is it's very difficult to have volunteers in the library these days, unfortunately, because the rules are that if those folks are doing things that paid employees can do, then they have to be paid employees doing that work, right?
Right.
So I do appreciate that as we open to the point where we were, we're going to get to the point where we have to do it with staff.
All right, thank you. You've all mentioned technology. What do you see for the new building as the evolving technology? You're going to open a new space. I think you mentioned automatic checkout. There are other technological things that we can be looking out for that will enhance our experience there. And Mark, I think we're starting with you.
Yes, I think that so the books are tracked. We have an automated tracking system, and that we were able to check out and leave books on the shelf so that they can be checked. So they have an electronic tag, they get checked out, and they can go outside the building. And so a lot of the time you don't really need even a staff person to interact. And so I think that there are things that we can do to reduce the interactions of staff and maybe have more volume go through at the same cost that we have. So I would say that.
All right, that sounds good. Ed, any ideas?
Yeah, I think the new building itself is going to have technology in a way that's going to be really dramatic. One of the investments that has been made in the new building is an automatic sorting machine, so that when the books come back in, we actually don't need people to sort through and figure out whether they're fiction or nonfiction and where they go in the stack. That's actually going to be automated, and that frees up our biggest asset, people, to do work that's serving the patrons better.
Sure.
So that's going to be good. But let's not limit it to RFID tags or other things like that. The building itself is going to be much more efficient. That old building, we had no control over when the heat was on or off or up or down. We were using, extension cords and whatever else. We're going to have climate control that's going to be better, more comfortable, and use energy more efficiently. We got solar generation on the roof. Technology is literally built into the building.
Excellent. And I'm looking forward to a better elevator.
Yes.
That's going to be
You won't get stuck in the elevator anymore.
Exactly. Really. Tara, you're next.
Agreed that, efficient energy systems are also going to help us be able to afford to continue to operate this building efficiently as we go forward with less budget impact. And I think that some of the technological equipment that is planned for the new building will be really important because the library circulation and usage has already gone up about 25% over the last 10 years in a time when budgets have averaged an increase of 1.47% increase. So technology has already helped to be able to meet the demands, but the forecast that the director has made is that circulation will go up by another 20% when the new building opens. So we will really need to rely on some of the technology like automatic sorting and other things to be able to try to meet the demand that the community has. I also think education around technology will be important, and especially in the time of AI and kids finding interesting ways to use it.
Thank you.
That's a great
Thank you.
opportunity.
Good ideas. Thank you, everyone. Let me shift a little bit again. The old library housed some significant pieces of Belmont's history, with both the War Memorial in the library and the Claflin Room with all the artifacts that were kept there and the beautiful art. What Belmont history will we see preserved and available in this new building? And Ed, we're starting with you.
So I'm thrilled that the new building's going to have a better, bigger space that makes historical artifacts more accessible to people in the community. It's part of the reason that we were successful at the Library Foundation in getting a grant from the Mass Cultural Council for their building construction fund, because that, I believe, was an important piece of one of their priorities. One of the other things is that on the first floor there's going to be the Waverly Oaks Room, and that will host some artifacts from the famous Waverly Oaks over in Beaver Brook. Nice. And that will be, currently that information, or those relics are artifacts, I guess, are in the Town Hall building, but in a place that nobody sees them. This brings that stuff front and center and makes it much more present and accessible. So across the board, I think our historical collection is going to be much more accessible to people.
Okay, good. Tara.
I think in the past, some of the historical collection at the library has been a little bit closed off. I've been in the Claflin Room one time when I chaperoned a second grade field trip, and I was amazed at the cool stuff that was there.
Wicked neat stuff
and
there.
I have never otherwise accessed it, but I think the new physical design of the library, allowing for more openness and more flexibility in terms of programming, I think will allow those types of things, both the programs and the actual collections, to be just a little bit more accessible, a little bit more visible, instead of a closed off room with no windows into it. One of the beautiful pieces of the new design is the way that there's so much light, there's so much line of sight across each floor to see what's happening in different areas of the library, and I think that will help a lot.
Okay, thank you. Mark, what are your ideas?
Yes, so in the old library, the historical room was closed off and locked, and when it was open, they always had a historical person in there watching everything to make sure nothing got damaged. In the new one, they asked for that, but we did not go that route. We will have a room with locked cabinets which will display those artifacts, and they can rotate what they put in the cabinets. That will allow the room to be open all the time for other uses. They won't have to have a person in there watching every teen that comes in or kid that comes in and pulls at the dress or something. So in any case, we'll have the display a little bit more limited, but we'll be able to access the room all the time. So we are really cognizant of the historical importance of those artifacts.
All right, sounds good. Let's now shift again, looking to the future. What do you see as the future needs of the library? I think the library trustees and the town in general has spent so much time looking forward. You know, there have been so many different plans for a new library. Finally, we are going to have one, and we are going to open the doors before the end of this calendar year, which is very exciting. With that new building, what do you see as any future needs of the library, and how would you propose to meet them? And Tara, we're going to start with you.
Sure. As I've mentioned in a few other responses, I do think that a little bit more funding availability for taking care of the new building will be important, but I've talked about that already. I think that also coming up with some creative collaborations to help meet those needs will also be important. I think there's a lot of opportunity. There's, the after-hours space, which is designed so that one of the meeting spaces can be accessed when the library is closed on evenings and weekends. That has a lot of potential, I think, to produce an income stream and being rented out. I think, as I mentioned, more partnership and collaboration, for example, with the schools and school libraries, and having support to help facilitate those relationships between the people who make that work, I think is important. I think also increasing the communication with the community to help the people that, for example, Mark mentioned, that feel like they don't use the library, so they understand
Thank you.
what they can access.
Good ideas. Mark.
So I think continuing to implement technology to free up the staff, but in a careful way, because tech companies are for-profits, and they want to make a profit when they sell us something. So we have to be very careful about that and their content. Secondly, as I mentioned before, addressing the diversity that's happening in the town. The Chinese community, the Indian community, there are many other communities that are coming into Belmont. That's different than what we had before, and I think we need to help those people use the library, use town resources. And then explaining all of this to our citizens so they feel, again, that they're getting good value, that they understand what we're doing, what we're spending the money on, and that it's appropriate.
All right. Thank you. Ed.
So my deepest fear is that the library is going to be so successful and people are going to love it so much that we're going to be bursting at the seams in another 5 or 7 years.
Uh-oh.
I certainly hope that doesn't come to pass, not because I don't want people to enjoy it, but because I would wonder that creates another new problem. I do think that the question of technology going forward is going to be an important driver for decision making. It's changing so fast, it will fundamentally change the way we interact with information, and so the library needs to be on the front end of that. I think the other piece that the library needs to do is it needs to a better marketing presence. And I appreciate that has not historically been in the bucket of responsibilities for the library. But figuring out how we're going to do that, how we can tell the story, as Mark said, but beyond that, how do we establish and build the brand of what the Belmont Library is beyond the limits of the town of Belmont? Because I think given the human capital and the financial capital that we have here, there is absolutely no reason that Belmont shouldn't have a really world-class programmatic activity.
Thank you. All right, now what I hope is an easy one. What feature of the new library excites you the most? What are you really waiting for? And Mark, we're going to start with you.
Well, I think that the big open space of the center of the library for large events for the town of Belmont will be a new feature that we really haven't had before. Certainly we've had the basement, big room down there. It has a capacity issue, but I think for very large events that we want to host, for example, One Book, One Belmont, one of the largest events that we have, I think we were very early in having One Book, One Belmont, and it's really, put the town on the map. I would leave it there.
Okay, excellent. Ed.
So I'm excited for the potential that the Makerspace offers, both in terms of the range of activities that can and will take place in that space, but also for the range of people that it's going to serve. Every library has a children's room. Every library has a periodicals area, but very few have makerspaces, and that's going to be pretty exciting.
It does sound very exciting. Yes, thank you. Tara, what's your favorite space?
For me personally, I'm excited about the reading porch. I think it looks beautiful, and I would love to curl up in a cozy spot and look out on, the nice lawn on the Underwood area. But also for my kids and all the rest of the teenagers in Belmont, I'm really excited about the teen space. That's really been something that has been missing in terms of, especially the last year or two. But even the old teen space, the librarians did an awesome job with it, but it just was limited by the physical space. So I think that will be a real gathering space for teenagers in Belmont in a really positive way. And I also love the indoor-outdoor integration, which is part of the design that you can really, from the outside, you can see inside. It's much closer to the sidewalk and to the road. And from the inside, you can see outside, and the design to access Wellington Brook a little bit more easily. I think all of that will really draw people there.
All right, thank you. Now, this is the easiest one ever as we approach the end of our time here together. What's your favorite book? And we're going to start with Ed, no pressure.
Wow, my favorite book. I thought you were going to ask what's my most recent book.
Well, you can give us that too. Doesn't have to be your favorite.
I read a really cool book called The 3-Year Swim Club, which is about a bunch of children, Japanese-American children in Hawaii in the 30s who were the children of cane cutters who learned to swim in the irrigation ditches and became Olympians in the 1948 Olympics. One of them won a gold medal. Turns out it's written by the cousin of our own Amy Checkaway. So.
Oh, excellent. So a Belmont connection.
Yeah.
We're going to have to remember that for Belmont Author Spotlight. Thank you. Tara, either most recent or favorite book?
Yeah, favorite is an impossible question for me to answer in a minute. I'm a huge reader and an English teacher, and I think about books every single day, all the time. But some that I have loved over time, I have loved Pride and Prejudice when I first read it in high school, and I cried when I read it, and it was one of my English teacher in high school gave it to me as a graduation present from her own library, and that was one of my most treasured gifts I've ever gotten. But more recently, I've really loved the book When Women Were Dragons by Kelly Barnhill, which came out a couple years ago. I was just blown away by the creativity and imagination in that book.
Okay. Mark?
I just read All That Glitters by Orlando Whitfield. It's about setting up modern art galleries in London, about two people that did it. It helped me understand that whole business about how modern art is bought and sold. I'm always interested in how businesses run, and that's one of the reasons that I think I can help the library is for understanding businesses.
Okay, very good. It sounds good. It actually, one of the most recent books that I've read is Art Heist, and it's about two individuals who work their way through France, Belgium, Germany in small museums and libraries and just decimate them, stealing stuff because they don't have the technology, they don't have enough staff, etc. It was a fascinating book, and it's all a real story. And I will say my favorite book, if someone asks me, it's always The Great Gatsby as a former high school English teacher. All right, thank you so much for being here. We've appreciated everything that you've shared with us. We definitely will be looking forward to the opening of the library. And Mark, a general date to be looking for?
The October was the date, Q4 I would say, but we'll know a lot when the library is enclosed in May, and I think then the builders will tell us the timing after that. But once it gets enclosed, they have a better sense.
You'll give us a date. Okay, so stay tuned to Library Trustees for an opening date. Thank you so much. Viewers, make sure you get out there and vote on April 2nd. April 1st. April 1st, Lord, they're going to shoot me. April 1st, not April Fool's Day. It really is Election Day. And you have two opportunities to elect someone for the Board of Library Trustees. Thank you so much. I'm Anne-Marie Mahoney, and this has been Candidates Debate for the Belmont Public Library Board of Trustees.